Hello again, welcome back to Asgard, and welcome to the second part of our little tiles tutorial. In the last part we covered, the basics, the tools, and how the mod works, and how you can do all kinds of crazy shapes, and we made this huge mess. We started kind of moving into some of the advanced features, such as transparency, where you can make your own glass blocks, basically, out of any color and texture that you want. But this episode, we're going to be focused on the advanced features of little tiles. Let me go ahead and grab basically all of this stuff. I'm going to show you how all this stuff works real quick. Okay, so first up, let's talk about the enhanced mode for tools. But if you hit Control C while you're holding any of the tools, the bag doesn't work. But you can open up, this is advanced mode. Okay, so right now it's set to fill mode. That's the default for chisel. So if for example, if I have a factory block and I'm trying to do a box, let's grab there, and let's try to bring this over to, say, right here. You'll notice that can't place it there, so it doesn't change the blocks that are there. It fills in this section because it can place that there. This basically claims this area because it's a slice, and you'll notice that it can't really place a tile through there, so guess what? It doesn't replace it. It's how default mode works. You've also got all mode. It can place structures, can only be placed if there's space for all tiles. So for example, in this case, if I come over here and I try to do this, it can't do it. It just cannot do it. Because it can't put this end of stuff. It won't even try to place anything. It has to have space for every bit of it, or it's not even going to bother trying. Overwrite mode, it says can place structures, will place all tiles and remove the overlapping space, cannot remove structure tiles. So if you have a structure tile, which we'll get into that here in just a little bit, those are tile entities basically. But for example, if I come over here and I do that, it replaces. And it can also do structures and stuff like that. If you're placing that like that, and like I said, we'll get into structures. And then you have replace mode, which is pretty straightforward. Your paintbrush, if you go into advanced, you can select and say any, like by default it's set to any, but we can specify and say only glowstone gets colored, or only glowing between stone tiles get colored, and you can match metadata. And then this right here, this is your grid size. So if you want to specify grid size, you can do that, how much it's going to paint. By default, it paints a block space, but you can have it just paint, smaller sections, like not a full block space, just the outer sections, or however you want to do it. So, and then let's see, the wrench, it doesn't have an advanced mode. It's pretty straightforward. It fixes glitches. The screwdriver, I don't know. No, it doesn't. The saw does not. If I recall, the glove does, though. Yeah. The glove has the default, the fill, the all, the overwrite, and the replace modes as well, just like the chisel did. Okay, so next up, let's talk about recipes. You have the little recipes and the advanced recipes. The advanced recipes we'll get into in just a second. Generally, chances are you're probably going to be using the little recipes if I had to guess, but the advanced recipes are also very, very useful. So, for example, let's take our glove, or let's take our chisel. Let's take our chisel, and let's set this to like a 2, and let's make a sphere, for example. Let's go ahead, and we'll start there, and let's bring this up. There we go. We have a sphere. That's cool, isn't it? That's awesome. Okay, so then what we can do is we could take our little recipe. And I forgot to mention, make sure and separate these stacks, because otherwise you'll get a stack of these. It's not very hard to clear them out, but what we're going to do is we're going to right-click here, and we're going to come over and we're going to right-click right over here. There we go. So now we have a recipe. Okay? And then what we can do is we can come over here and we can right-click on the ground. We can say none, fixed, chair, door. We're going to get into all this stuff. But say, for example, we do fixed. We're going to fix it, and we're going to call this sphere. And we're going to save it. And then what we can do is we can come over, and if we have a little workbench set up, place that down. We can drop our recipe into there. And we're going to say craft. Let's make a few of these. So let's make 8 of them. And then what we can do is we can come over here and we can place these out. So that's basically how you can copy things, as if you had a blueprint or something. You can make them in this little workbench. That's what this is for making, and it doesn't retain its inventory, so drop my little recipe on the ground, but you can use that for making little structures or copying things. And you can do this, like, for example, just to give you an example here. Let's grab, that's going to be our first position. Now let's come way over here. And then we're going to right click right there. That's our second position. Okay. And let's come over here just to show you how powerful this is. Let's hit craft. Okay. And look at this. Boom. I have just duplicated that entire area. So, I mean, really, and the nice thing, I'll show you something really, really, really nice here in just a second. But I've just duplicated that entire area over to here. And, you know, I can make multiples of these. And they do take bits out of your bag. So, I mean, you would have to have the materials for this on you. So, I mean, I guess technically, probably if it got too big, you know, you would have to have quite a few little bags on you with the bits required. Because it does require those bits. Like if you're in survival mode, it does require those to be able to do that. But there's other things that you can do with this. For example, let's take this thing and let's change it to a chair. Okay, and we're going to call this chair is going to be called sphere. We're going to put that right there, and we're going to craft one. Okay, and so then I can set this down, and it looks just like all the other ones. But if I come over here and I right click it, look at that. It puts me on top of it. So I can come over here and I can just sit on top of my little sphere as if it was a chair, right? And so, I mean, you could do some really fancy chairs. For example, you can do all kinds of stuff with this. If you're making a chair that's like 2 blocks tall or even bigger, I mean, you could make a chair that was like a big floating orb and have it so that you're sitting in the middle of it or whatever. But for example, let's make just a really, really simple little chair here. Nothing fancy, but all right, we'll set this to a box and we'll bring this across. There we go. We kind of have like, I don't know, it looks more like a table, but it's too tall for a chair. But just for example's sake, because I'm not making anything right now in particular. But like I said, we will do some, we'll be doing some building with this here soon. But for example, if I brought this up and then I had this like come over or something, and so we kind of have this like giant's chair, and then I mean we could even make it more fancy if you wanted to. It doesn't really matter. Okay, I don't know, but anyways, there's our chair. Okay, so what we can do then is we can, we can take our recipe, and we're going to let's say that we want to set right here. What we're going to do is we're going to take this, we're going to right click, there we go, and then we're going to come over here and we're going to craft this. Or wait, I'm sorry, I don't need to craft that yet. I need to set this so that it is a chair, and we're going to say this is going to be called chair. And original name, I know, we're going to craft it, and you can see structure is chair. It's going to tell you what it is, but or what you've named it. But then we can come over here and we can just set that down, right? And then we could take our little recipe. We're going to grab this block up to that block. And then we're going to toss that in there and craft. And then what we can do is we can come over here now and set the top on this. Okay, this top part, of course, is not a chair. Then if we right click, we're actually setting on this. Okay, so if you're going to have it set up so it's a multi-leveled chair, or if you're making it, you can make a bench if you want. If you're making a bench and you only want, honestly, if you're making a bench, I would make it so you could sit in multiple different places on the bench. So maybe have like, this is a chair, and then the block next to it's a chair, and then a chair and a chair, and so on. And you'll notice this doesn't have to be placed in a specific block space. I mean, this is actually straddling 2 blocks. I'm still setting right in the middle of it. So it doesn't matter. Placement doesn't matter at all. But then, if you have something that's taller, just make sure that that top section is separated from where the highest point that you're actually going to be sitting on. Because if I tried to do this, for example, just to show you what happens if you don't do it right, if I was to grab, say, from here to, okay, that's first position there, and then I came over here and I set this to chair, and we're going to call it chair 2. And I come over here and I throw that in and I craft it. and I set this one down as a chair. Okay, and then I right click on it. Oh, well, actually that worked out. That one actually worked out well. But in some cases, if you have, let's say, for example, let me do something here really quick. Okay, just as an example, let's say we did that. I don't know what it's supposed to be, but let's say it's a chair. Okay, and then I took and I made a recipe with this. Whoops. I need to clean out my inventory already. Okay, let's say we made a recipe here. So that to there. And we came over here and we turned this into a chair. There we go. And we came over here and we right clicked it. You could see I'm not going to be able to set in it. It's actually not even, oh wait. Okay, and if we turn this into a chair and we set this down, I come over here and I try to right click on it. See, it's going to set me at the very top. And that's not what you want. So in that case, what you're going to do is you're going to have to, like I showed you, you're going to have to, let me actually grab. So in that case, what you're going to want to do is set up your chair, you know, as a separate structure, and then make a recipe that takes this to there and craft that out. And there we go. See, it looks the same, but now I set underneath that overhang thing, whatever it's supposed to be. So if you're doing something like that, just make sure that you set your chair position to the right spot. So if you have something that hangs above it, that's fine. Just, you know, just make sure that that's not the highest point, or you separate the structure like that. And that's pretty much how chairs work. I mean, they're pretty straightforward. But let's take our recipe. What's the next one on the list here? Okay, now the difference between, one thing I forgot to mention, the difference between fixed and none. If we craft something, this is none, right? And then this, we're going to change it to fixed. We're going to save it as fixed. And then if we come over here and we drop that in, we craft one that's fixed. Okay, we've got one that's fixed and one that's not. If we come over here, this is that huge, humongous, crazy thing. If we drop that down and I come over here and I try to break this, I'm going to break piece by piece. Okay, now if I have something that's fixed, on the other hand, even if it's a whole building, and I drop this fixed structure down, I come over here and I break it, boom, it breaks the entire structure. That way, it sees the entire structure as one block. Okay, so it's going to behave like a single block. So just a heads up. That's what fixed does. It can be kind of cool if you want to move buildings around and stuff like that. It can be pretty useful. So we've got doors, sliding doors, we have ladders, beds, storage, and no clip. Let's go ahead and cover no clip real quick, because it's pretty straightforward. So for example, this big, I don't know, this thing that we made earlier, you can set it to slowness, like as if you were walking through cobwebs or not walking through cobwebs. Let's set it as not. We're going to save that as a sphere. If we drop this in here, basically it makes a no clip variation of it. So as before they were a solid block, now we can just walk right through it. So you can make your own ghost blocks with little tiles like that, and with anything. With anything you want to. You could even make them glassy looking. You know, you could do all kinds of stuff with it. And then if you wanted to make it so that it has like spiderweb effects, we can do that. And of course, your structures are going to look better because you're going to spend more time on them than I have. But I'm just kind of showing you examples. But as you can see, it's like I'm walking through cobwebs trying to get through there. So it kind of has a really slow effect for that. So that's how that works. And then next up we have, by the way, one thing I want to show you, since the sun is going down, let's set this to time set night. One really nice thing you may remember back on like 1.7 age, there was carpenter's blocks and you could apply glowstone. You can do the same thing with little tiles. So for example, if I want to make these chairs glow, whoops, I can shift right click. And that one is now emitting light. Okay, and come over here, shift right click, that's now emitting light. And that'll work on any structure. Of course, if I was to just put just a single little tile of glowstone or something in there that has light, it's going to emit light. But I can also apply glowstone to anything, regardless of if it emits light or not. I can apply glowstone and it will emit light. Okay. So something to bear in mind. You can make your own lights, and they don't have to have any light blocks in them. They can still emit light. Okay, so next up, let's take a look at the doors. This is one of my favorite features. But we're still only scratching the surface. I love it. There's so many things. Okay, so we made this. It's not fancy, but you can you can go all out with it, and you'll spend forever making little things. It's a little bit quicker with this, in my opinion, than with chisels and bits, though, because you can copy whole huge sections, especially when you're doing like roofs. One thing I hate with chisels and bits is I've got to take it one piece at a time with blueprints and go, copy, 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 where you can do larger segments with this, which is great. It's a great feature. But for example, let's set this to door. And for right now, we're going to leave it as just standard. But I'm going to show you a little bit more with it here in just a minute. But for example, if we set this up, and you can change the axis and stuff, but if I come over here and I right-click this, it moves that entire segment. Yeah, it seems to be... And then I can push it in this direction. Now it does kind of do this little thing. Depending on what you're using, normally it won't do this, but if you notice it, if I just stand here, it just kind of takes it a second to update. But for example, if I have this, okay, the red line right there indicates kind of like where the hinges, where it's going to be hinged at. So for example, if I right click this, you can see this one doesn't have an animation issue. That one does. I think it's just so big. It just doesn't know what to do with itself. But for example, you can see it's kind of like it's using that point and it's rotating around that. Now you notice it's kind of going off on its own, just own direction at the moment. The reason being is because it doesn't have anything to hinge on. So the hinge, it can basically just rotate a full 360 around that point, which you can use that to really cool effect if you want. But if I want to make an actual door, I can just put any kind of block here, and there we go. You could see that this is going to kind of rotate around that. Now, it can't go any further in that direction, so it's going to come back this way. But for example, if we brought this wall out like that, of course, this door is so big, it needs more space. But now it's only going to be able to pivot off in this direction. Okay, and what's cool is this does have collision, and you'll notice that I can't walk through it while it's doing its door animation opening, and it's actually going to push me out of the way. So it does have full collision with it, which I do quite love. You wouldn't think it does. That's actually one of the newer features, if I recall, adding full collision to the doors. Which is quite great. So it'll actually kind of smash me right here. But yeah, so that's how that works. And then, for example, if I wanted to come over here and let's say we want to swap the axis. Okay, and let's save that. I'll show you what happens whenever you swap the axis on this. Okay, so what that's going to do is it means it's going to rotate around that red section, right? So if I hit this now, it does like that, right? And what's really, really cool is if I was to put blocks here, I can't even move this now. So you could actually use that for redstone even, so that this door locks with redstone, because it can't be opened if there's blocks in its way, right? And I mean, you could do the same thing here. You could just have nothing more than just a piston, that pushes a block out right there. Well, now this door can't open. So if there's anything blocking its collision, it will not open. Now, players and creatures and stuff like that, it will still open, but it'll just push them out of the way. But if there's blocks or something that it can't push out of the way, in its way, it will not be able to move those blocks or whatever. Okay, so let's swap the axis back. You can see there's lots of different options here. But for example, I can move the axis closer. So if I want to move it to there, and you could set the duration. So if I want to make this door open really fast, let's set it to 10 ticks, a half second, okay? And you can also even it out. You can see that this is slightly moving, and it's giving it, I think it's like a two block or whatever hinge to work off of. But for example, let's go ahead, let's save that now. And this is, I mean, it's basically like Melissa's doors. and it can replace Melissa stores in a lot of aspects. Now you don't have the custom sounds. I think that's the worst part of it. But for example, let's do that. And now let's open this door. Look at that. And you can see that it's a lot tighter of a hinge where it's hinging off of. So a little bit more realistic of a hinge. And I mean, you can actually even build a hinge into this, and you can put your hinge, for example, you can put your hinge into the wall there if you want. So I mean, you can do some crazy things. So for example, like if I put the hinge right here in the middle of it, okay, and I save that, and let's craft that. Let's craft this really strange door with the hinge in the middle. Okay, look at that. It now rotates around the center of it. So I mean, you can do some really crazy things if you want with this. I mean, it's so much. I mean, I can't show you every possibility within the span of this video, but I mean, there's a lot you can do. You can just totally customize your doors however you want. Now, you can also do a sliding door. These are probably one of my favorites. You can have it slide up, north, south, west, east, down, you know, however you want it to go. And let's set this to, well, let's leave this one to 80, for example. I'll show you what that does. You can reset the view, change view, flip view, so that you can see the way the door is going to move, you know, from different viewpoints. So, but let's say the duration's going to be 10 on this. Let's save it, and let's craft it. Okay, and let's set this down, and now watch this. It shoots up, and of course I've got it set pretty much so high that it's not a realistic door, because it does move up in its entire block space when it's like this. Okay, so just a heads up. But if you do make your doors too big, there will be some kind of rendering issues, like this one over here, for example. Will sometimes, yeah, see, like that. It'll take a second to update the way it looks. And then if you do anything really fancy with it, like glass and things like that, because, like, for example, this. I think the issue with this one was whenever it moves it, you could see that the glass has to, like, shift direction and shift pattern and stuff based on the placement of where it's at. So you can kind of tweak that a little bit so it doesn't have to do that. It is possible to make big doors that don't do that. But just a heads up, especially anything with connected textures and stuff like that, it will kind of have some render issues. Nothing major, and it's probably being worked on if I had to guess, but you know, it's nothing. I mean, it can do some crazy things with this, right? And the nice thing is, oh, let me change, let me show you how this works really, really quick. So for example, let's set this to 20, okay? Let's make that one little change to it. Okay, and this is the one that's set to 80 that shoots up like that. This one only goes up that high. So, depending on how, you know, high you set it and all that, it's going to change the way that the height in which it moves. And what's really, really cool, one thing that I love that I'm going to be using in some building is I can put water down, for example, and okay, the water is stopped right there. But what's cool is I can make slice gates. And so I can open this up, release the water, close it, block the water, and I just love it. I love just being able to do that, right? There's just a lot of possibility, even beyond just making doors. There's so much that you can do. And for example, if I came in here and I said, let's change this to slide down, okay? Drop that in there. Let's craft one of these. We set this door up right here. You'll notice it's not going to do anything. But if I open this up, and you don't actually have to open the entire block space, what you probably do is build something with little tiles so that this has space to go down. That's where the issue was. But you'll have it so that there's actual space for it to go down, like between the little tiles. But for example, if I put some dirt right there, you'll notice it's not going to open. It has to have the entire space clear that it's going to move through. Okay, so just a heads up. But you can, if you want to, you can have, let me grab the, and now the door still works. I mean, there's a little bit of a rendering thing. It's glass, so it's going to happen. You probably wouldn't have glass there. You would have like a block, and it shouldn't render through that. But it's trying to render through the glass, and it causes some issue. But you could have this slide down and kind of go into like a deposit where the door sets whenever it's pulled down. You know, just make sure there's enough space, but have it so that it's flat so you can actually walk across, and you would be walking across, you know, the top of the door whenever it goes down. You could do something like that. You know, there's a lot of different options. There's a whole lot of different options. Okay, and then we also have ladders. These are really, really cool. So we can say ladder, and let's save that. And once again, I mean, you can go crazy with the style and make it fancy and all that. One nice thing is you can make ladders that do not have to be put up against a wall. That is a really great feature. And you can turn anything into a ladder, which basically makes it climbable like a ladder. See? And like I said, I mean, it doesn't have to be up against a wall. It could be, I mean, I could literally, for example's sake, let me grab... We're going to bring a one wide little bit up here. And let's go ahead and grab that to there. Okay, and let's set this to a ladder. For example. Drop that into there, craft it. I'll throw that away. I can set this up. It's just one block wide, but I can climb it like it's a ladder. Okay, so I mean, you can do all kinds of crazy things with that. You can make any kind of climbable item that you want to. Very, 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 very easily. Okay, but anyways, I know it's about wrapping up point for this part. We will continue on in part 3, which will come out the same day as this. Just kind of splitting it up in half because there was a lot to cover. A lot of features to cover within the mod. So, anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. If you did, as always, be sure and hit that like button. And go ahead and subscribe if you're not already to stay updated with when new videos come out. And I hope to see you guys next time. So until then, as always, do take care. Stay safe. I'll see you guys then.